Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of In Our Midst, where we feature people and organizations making positive change in our community and in the world. My name is Phil Rosner, and I am your host for this series. In this episode, I will be talking with Dr. Moussa Magassa, who is presently the Human Rights Education Advisor and Specialist in Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Partnerships at the University of Victoria, where he has received a PhD in Curriculum and Instruction. Dr. Magassa's research focuses on critical race theory, anti-racism education, Islamophobia, human rights education, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and immigrants and refugees' integration and adaptation in host communities. He also holds a Master of Arts in Human Security and Peace Building and a Bachelor of Arts in Conflict Resolution and Peace Studies from KwaZulu-Natal University in South Africa. Previously, Dr. Magassa worked as an integration program coordinator for immigrants and refugees in Vancouver, and as a specialist in nonviolence, peace education in many parts of Africa. Apart from his work at UVIC, he's also the co-chair of the Greater Victoria Police Diversity Advisory Committee and a board director with the Victoria Multi-Faith Society. Please join me now as we delve deeper into the life and work of Dr. Moussa Magassa. Hello, Dr. Magassa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Phil, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Dr. Magassa, before we discuss your present work, could you please tell us a bit about your family and the community that you grew up in?
Yeah, so I love talking about my family because, as we say, you are no one without your family. I grew up with in a big family. My father has almost 22 children.
Wow.
He was polygamist. And I grew up in a small village in Senegal, in the north of Senegal, in a tribe called the Soninke. And the Soninke, we are all about family. And, my biological mother died when I was very young, almost 4 years old. So I was very lucky to be brought up by my father's other wives. And I am the man today thanks to those wonderful women and mothers who gave me everything. So my biological mother only have two of us, me and my sister. But in my culture, we don't have the concept of half brother, half sister.
I see.
They are all your brothers and sisters. So I always make the joke that I'm the most lucky person on earth because I have 22 of them, and I will never go hungry, and I will never be poor because of my family.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. So with regards human rights, if we can kind of get right into the subject here, yes. Could you tell us, is there racial disparity in Senegal?
Yes, I will say there is diversity. I will call it racial diversity because in Senegal what we have, it is ethnicity. So we have different ethnic groups. As I said early on, I'm from the Soninke tribe or the Soninke ethnic group. And then you have the Wolof, you have the Fulani, you have the Serer, and you have the Jola, and you have other tribes. One thing though in Senegal is that we don't have that kind of conflict that we see in other places around Africa between those different ethnicities and groups. So in Senegal we have been very lucky that so far, in touch wood, we haven't had this kind of experience at a certain extent. So once a while you hear there is some tension, but it doesn't blow into a full scale of a full, war or a civil war or so on. Things like this.
Okay. So growing up in Senegal, did you receive your full education in Senegal, or did you go to a different university?
I did receive some of my education in Senegal, for example, the primary school. And you know, in Senegal, the official language is French. So I did get my primary school there and my high school and some of my university. But later I moved around the world, and I think I have been called the lifelong learner. So every country I go, I try to get a degree there. So and I keep studying. After Senegal, I lived in other places, all the way to Canada here, where I also completed another master's and a PhD. But definitely I will say that I have been lucky to study every country I lived, and to just better myself.
Right.
Yeah.
So what prompted you to emigrate to Canada?
That's a lovely story. You know, Phil, because usually when Canadians hear about people immigrating to Canada, there is always this mindset that they come in here to better their life, or that they are refugees and they're running from something. Me, I came here as a love immigrant because my wife was a Canadian, and she was coming back home to study at the university to do a PhD. And on those days we used to live in South Africa, and that was the only reason I came here. So as I don't think Immigration Canada has created the category called love immigrant, but that's my category.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I understand that you embrace the quality conveyed by the word Ubuntu.
Yes.
Please could you tell us the meaning of the word and the value that it carries in your personal life?
I'm sure in every human society there might be some some reference to the concept of Ubuntu. In South Africa, we can call it Ubuntu Abantu Mabantu. You are a human being because of other human being. In Senegal, in Wolof, we say Nit Moye Garabu Nit, that a human being is a medicine for another human being. So Ubuntu just means that I am because of you. You know, I can't be outside of you. You know, my success, my being is because you exist. So that calls us to be mindful, that calls us to be responsible about our actions, behavior and attitude towards each other as human beings, and that calls us to be humble and to walk on this earth humbly. But most importantly, Ubuntu brings in another concept and another idea of being a human being. It brings a human family concept, the concept that not only we are human beings, but we are human beings in a bigger family of human beings. And it breaks down the Western concept of family, that is a nucleus, you, your wife, and your children. Ubuntu say it is more than that. It is all of us, regardless of race, gender, sex, sexual orientation. So you can imagine if we could practice Ubuntu on earth, can you just imagine what it will be?
Right.
You know, if we just think about everyone like ourselves and treat them the way they want to be treated, how wonderful and how welcoming this earth will be. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for explaining that. Like Adrian Carter, who I interviewed in the first episode of this series, I understand that you have an interracial marriage.
Yes.
And I was just wondering, has there been any real societal challenges with regards to your marriage?
Yes. You know, diversity exists, and that's what makes us rich and powerful and human, because we are different. But people, because we are people as human beings, sometimes we can see differences as a threat, which is not the case, but people can react to it. So in every intercultural marriage, there will always be people who celebrate you, and there will be people on the margin who will feel like this is not right. Expressly, I know that in my community, I have come across people who, even if they don't say openly, you know, some of the attitudes they have, I can see that they have a judgment. And that's okay also, because, you know, as we say back home, It is when people judge you that you know the value and the value of what you're doing, if whether it is good or not for the community.
Right.
So, but intercultural marriages are often frowned upon in some situations, which is sad because it is diversity, it is the richness of our human spirit, and they should be celebrated and accepted. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One thing I wanted to talk about, particularly Dr. Magassa, particularly with regards to forms of verbal and or physical repression due to racial bigotry, is what to your mind causes an individual to passively watch another human being being brutalized in some way and do nothing about it?
Well, there is a lot of things that can be the reason for that. One of the things, and what I hear, is when people feel like they can't do anything, they just disengage. They think that this is none of their problem. So you can see that the responsibility of being a human, being Ubuntu, in those people is frowned upon, because the pain and the injustice towards another human being, they can just walk away from it thinking that they are okay, they don't need to be there. Right. That can be that we call it the diswitnessing, as Dr. Ishiyama of UVIC once called it. And then there is the second reason why people behave that way and don't do anything again, and Ishiyama also come to talk about passive witnessing, that people look and say, oh yes, I wish I can do something, but I can't do anything. So they talk to themselves, inside themselves, and not do anything. If you recall George Floyd case, there was a lot of passive witness, and this witnesses who were watching it and didn't do anything.
Right.
And then we have some of the people who just say, no, this is not right, and they jump in and do something. However, the lack of people for intervening when they see injustice and racism, for me, it is just this issue of humanity, that they fail to really fulfill their duties and their responsibilities as human. And it is also when they look at the other who is being brutalized and fail to see a human in that person. Right. And it is a matter of social, ethical responsibility. When people don't have that ethical responsibility towards themselves and other people, they will always stand by and not do the right thing being not watch injustice being committed. So that's why nowadays when we talk about racism and the systemic racism we talk about, and my call to people have always been, we can't afford as human beings to have racism in our society, and left alone systemic racism. And no one will do it and change it for us but us.
Right.
And then I add that, close your eyes and just think about a society without racism, a society without violence, a society without injustice. Can you imagine what kind of society will be? And we stop us from having that society.
Right.
Whoa.
Yeah.
We can't have it. And why don't we do something to have that society?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dr. Magassa, can we now touch on the subject of racial profiling? I think it is an undeniable fact that there is an epidemic of repression and hate woven into the fabric of American society. But while the situation in America has been most consistently in the news of late, I mean, racial profiling is most certainly not isolated to America. Is that correct?
It's not isolated to American. I think as Canadian, we often like to compare ourselves to other American, thinking that it is worse across the border and that we have it good, which I don't agree. The same shooting of black people, indigenous people in America is prevalent in Canada. Racial profiling is, again, this attitude that people think they are better than someone else. It is stereotyping, having a set image of people, a negative set image of people. It is having a prejudgment, a negative prejudgment of people. And then you add prejudgment and stereotype that give you differential treatment, which is discrimination. Differential treatment, then you treat someone else who is different from you as bad, as negative as you can, and you profile them. Racial profiling is just treating people differently, but based on their race.
Right.
And the problem in Canada, again, is that racial profiling and racism and systemic racism against black people and other brown, it is systemic, it is endemic. It is why we say police racial profiling minority group, but it is because it is systemic and endemic in police behaviors and other people. But it goes beyond it. It goes beyond it. The systemic racism we see in society go beyond the contemporary and everyday racism. You have to go all the way back to history. You have to look at the scripture in some religious interpretation of the words, and you will find that racism is quite interestingly being framed in a way that now we can say it. You see in some of those books where it is clearly says that black people have been cursed. Quite interestingly. So if you have someone who grew up with that mindset about black people, and then you give them a uniform and a gun, what else can you expect of them?
Right.
So that's a problem in our society. It is not only what is happening to the US with George Floyd, but I think it goes beyond it. And we need to go back to those books. If there need to be revision of the text, we need to find the original text. And it is not only religion, it is culture. It is, look at the movies, you know, who plays the bad roles, look at everything.
Right.
So a society with endless possibilities of justice and peace is a society who will be courageous enough to dig into those stereotypes and get rid of them.
Right. In our brief talks prior to this interview, you were talking about how we, the European settlers in North America, are still reaping the benefit of colonization of the indigenous people.
Yes.
Please, could you expound on this line of thought a bit?
Yes. Colonization is what brought me here. It gave me a visa to come to a country that is not mine, a country that the original people didn't give me that visa. So we still reaping those benefits of colonization. If you look around you, what is happening for our sisters and brothers, indigenous brothers and sisters, if you look at what is happening to them, you know, the poisoning of water in the Athabasca River, you look at the system that is around them, there is, how you say, the, you know, where they live, you know, what they can access from the rest of the benefit we all are having, the running water, you know, garbage collection, jobs, you know. Imagine all this, the limitations that is put on indigenous people of this country, you know, through different system of colonization, patriarchy, imperialism, you know, the Indian Act. Imagine what happened to them with the residential school, killing the child in the indigenous. That was cultural genocide. I didn't invent it. It is written clearly in the different document. So we are reaping the benefit. Also, we say we apologize. Also, we say through and reconciliation commission, but those recommendations, what happened to them? How far have we gone to implement those recommendations? And what about those recommendations of the indigenous peoples that were not written in that book? Have we even heard that indigenous people is still asking for other ways to fix the legacies, and we're not even recording those? So definitely we are reaping it. And because of that benefiting from the colonization, I think it is why you and I, we are here.
Right.
Yeah. So my call is for us to be part of the solution. And I'm not talking about the solution of tomorrow. I don't think indigenous people who live today want to wait until tomorrow for us to do this. the right thing.
Right.
I'm talking about the solution of yesterday. You know, that indigenous people who are asking for whatever they're asking, that those asks need to be answered now and right now. Yeah. So generations have passed, and it is time that we stop planning for tomorrow, but we fix things today.
Right.
And we can fix it without them. That's the clear things. I want to be clear. We're not fixing it for indigenous people. We follow their lead for them to tell us what to do and how to do it. So for me, that will be the real reconciliation.
I see. Right. Okay. Finally, Dr. Magassa, please could you tell us about the work that you are engaged in at the Equity and Human Rights Office at the University of Victoria, with particular regard to your work in imparting information to the community as to what we can do, both as individuals and collectively, to help stem, the ongoing scourge of racism in our society.
Yeah. So many years ago, I was very fortunate to get a job at UVIC as a university human rights educator. And my mandate was to try to enhance the university community's understanding about diversity, inclusion, human rights, and social justice. So to go around and, educate people, whether they are a student, they are a staff, or they are as a professor, to educate them about human rights. Not only tell them about their rights, but most importantly, their responsibility. Responsibility towards themselves and towards society at large. So that work include not only human rights, but also all the intersections of human rights. Racism is one thing. Social oppression is another one. Discrimination, and there is a lot of, I will say, areas of focus in my work. But racism, I realize, and this is not only me, but all the people who research in racism and social justice, we know that the university is a place where this can happen, but society is also another place. That racism is not only located in one specific institution, it is societal, it is cultural, and it is systemic. So as a community member, I realize that I can't just be focusing on racism at UVIC, but I have also to look at it outside of the university. And as a community member, volunteer my time and my energy to help, address racism in the community. And that was one of the reasons I joined the groups. And right now I'm working with one group in Victoria we call Black Victoria. And Black Voices of Victoria, or Voices of Black People in Victoria, or Black communities. I will say communities in the plural, because we have been talking to the City Council of Sanish, the different police boards, different chief of police, and not only at Sanish but everywhere in the province. And the role I try to play as a community member is just to bring my help to mobilize the community at large, not only the Black community, but all the community, for us to have this conversation, because I believe that in order to dismantle systemic racism, it needs to be the concern and the responsibility of all of us, regardless of our race, gender, sex, sexual orientation, and religion. So I volunteer in the African community and trying to do that. I also volunteer with the Greater Victoria Police Diversity Committee, which again, it is a way for me as a co-chair to help not only our community and the police to know each other better, but also to educate each other about what the community needs and what the police need, and how can we make this society and this community a better place for all of us. So I will say it's not a new work, because I have done this in many countries I have lived. South Africa was one of the places that was where you had, pervasive racism. And I have been lucky to see in my lifetime that, the systemic racism or the government based on racism has been dismantled in South Africa. We still have racism there, but a lot of work has been done to change the system, and people are still working on it. And I know it will always be there, but over this generation, hopefully it will be minimized. That's why in Canada I get involved in this work, because I know we can do it, we can change it. And I have this vision of a society without racism, without violence, without hatred, and I know it is possible in my lifetime.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Magassa.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In Our Midst. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to contact us, please email us directly at inourmidst@shaw.ca. Thank you, and see you next time.